The scent of stale tea and cheap ink filled the small office. David watched me, a flicker of urgent impatience in his eyes that he tried and failed to hide. My gaze drifted from his face, handsome in a stern, uncompromising way, to the divorce papers laid out with bureaucratic precision on the table between us. Then it settled on Sophia, hovering just behind his shoulder, doing a magnificent impression of a wounded sparrow. In another life I had signed those papers. My hands had trembled, tears blotching the cheap paper as I scrawled my name, believing David's lie that it was only temporary, a necessary sacrifice to protect Sophia's reputation. I had played the noble fool. And my reward? They married in secret a month later. I was evicted from my home in the military compound and died alone, coughing my lungs out in a frozen single-room apartment during a winter that seemed to have no end. That was then. Now I felt a cold, clear calm settle over me. I smiled. Sure, I agree. David blinked. Clara, do you agree to the divorce? He repeated, the urgency in his voice more pronounced. I took a moment to really look at the man I had called my husband. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark green uniform lending him an air of unquestionable authority. I had been mesmerized by that authority once, mistaking it for strength of character. I heard you the first time, David. I agree. I picked up the pen. It was a cheap ballpoint, the kind that smudges. Sophia, in her faded floral dress, her hair in two neat braids, wrung her hands. David, maybe this is a mistake. I can't let Clara make such a sacrifice for me. Her voice was a delicate tremor, her eyes shining with unshed tears. An Oscar-worthy performance. It's no sacrifice, Sophia, I said, cutting her off before she could build up a full head of steam. It's just a signature. I bent over the paper. The line for my name was a blank space waiting for a future. In my past life I had filled it with grief and desperation. This time I inscribed it with icy finality. Clara Evans. The letters were clean, sharp, and unwavering. David's expression shifted from impatience to confusion, then to something akin to annoyance. He had expected tears, pleading, a scene. My calm compliance was a script change he hadn't anticipated. Clara, you seem surprisingly accepting of this, he said, his tone laced with suspicion. I placed the pen down with a quiet click. What did you expect, David? That I'd get on my knees and beg you to stay? Don't flatter yourself. Sophia jumped in, her hand fluttering to his arm. Clara, he didn't mean it like that. He's just concerned for your feelings. My feelings are perfectly intact, thank you, I said, standing up and brushing a non-existent speck of dust from my trousers. I'm a qualified doctor. Do you really think my world begins and ends with you, David? A dark flush crept up his neck. He was a man accustomed to command, to being the center of gravity in any room. My indifference was a direct challenge. Clara, let's not be unpleasant. Unpleasant? I let out a short, humorless laugh. You want to reunite with your childhood sweetheart. I'm stepping aside. And now you're accusing me of being too agreeable? What exactly would make you happy, David? He opened his mouth to retort, but I was done. I picked up the copy of the agreement that granted me the small house and half our meager savings. The terms are clear. I'll be moving my things out of your quarters by the end of the week. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the stuffy office into the pale afternoon sun. The air outside the Civil Affairs Bureau felt different, cleaner, sharper, full of possibility. Behind me I heard Sophia's whisper, David, do you think she suspects about us? I didn't hear his answer. It didn't matter. The first move was made. The game was on. As I stepped onto the pavement I saw my mother, Helen, waiting anxiously by the gate, her face etched with worry. She rushed forward, her eyes searching mine. Clara? Well, did that worthless man really go through with it? I waved the freshly stamped divorce certificate. It's done, Mom. Her hand flew to her mouth. You actually signed? I told you to cry, to make a scene. Men like him, if you're too willing, they think they're doing you a favor. I linked my arm through hers, steering her away from the building. Times have changed, Mom. It's 1978. A woman doesn't need to define herself by her husband. She fretted all the way home. New era or not, how is a woman supposed to manage on her own? And he's a major. You've offended him. How will you manage at the hospital? He had a point. In my last life after the divorce, my career at the military hospital had withered. I was sidelined, given the worst shifts, and eventually transferred to a remote clinic where I faded into obscurity and death. But this life would be different. Don't worry, Mom, I said, a secret smile touching my lips. David is going to be far too busy with his own problems to bother with me. We reached our small, familiar house. It felt like a sanctuary. Mom put the kettle on, muttering darkly about David and that scheming little actress, Sophia. There's no use dwelling on it, Mom, I said, pouring the hot water over the tea leaves. The fragrant steam was a promise. Mom, how much savings do we have? Besides your salary? I've put away about 120 yuan. She looked at me puzzled. Why? I took a deep breath. I want to start a business. I'm going to open a clinic. Her eyes widened, then sparkled with a mixture of fear and excitement. A clinic? But you're a military doctor. Will they allow it? I'll resign, I said, the decision solidifying as I spoke the words. I have a plan. Just then a knock at the door interrupted us. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, her face alight with nosy curiosity. Clara dear, is it true? You and Major Davidson have parted ways. The news traveled faster than a telegraph. Yes, Mrs. Higgins. It's true. Oh, you poor child, she clucked, shaking her head. A man like that. How could you let him go? There's nothing to let go, I replied evenly. If we're not suited, we're not suited. I politely but firmly ushered her out, but her visit was a harbinger. The whispers had begun. They thought I was the pitiable one, the discarded wife. Little did they know I had just discarded a lifetime of servitude and sorrow. The signature on that paper wasn't an end. It was my first true beginning. The knock came again just as I was clearing the teacups. This time it was a young private from the base, his face earnest. Dr. Evans? Major Davidson asked me to bring these by for you. He held out a cardboard box. Inside were some tins of food, a bar of soap, and a few other mundane supplies. It was a gesture meant to look conciliatory, but it felt like an insult. A peace offering from the man who had just ended our marriage. Is there a medical bag in here? Asked my voice cool. The private shook his head. No, ma'am. Just what you see. I thanked him and closed the door, leaving the box on the floor by the entrance. I wouldn't touch its contents. This was David's attempt to soothe his own conscience, to paint himself as the generous ex-husband. I wanted no part of his charade. That night, lying in the familiar comfort of my old bed, the memories of my past life flooded back with painful clarity. I saw it all. The fake divorce, the swift, secret marriage, my gradual erosion from the community, the cold, lonely death. But intertwined with the pain was knowledge. I knew the exact timeline of David and Sophia's affair. I knew they would formally marry within the month. I knew she would quickly become pregnant. This knowledge was my weapon. And I intended to use it. The next morning I went straight to the county administrative office. The air was thick with the smell of dust and bureaucracy. A clerk with thick glasses looked over my inquiry about policies for private business. You're a military doctor, Comrade Evans? He asked, peering at my identification. Opening a private practice could be complicated. I understand, I said smoothly. I'm prepared to resign my commission. His eyebrows shot up. Leaving a guaranteed state job was considered madness by most. But I saw the future. The reforms were here and private enterprise was the path to true independence. I spent the day gathering forms, visiting a pharmaceutical wholesaler to gauge supply costs, and drafting a business plan in my head. My medical knowledge was my asset. I knew which treatments were in high demand and which medicines offered the best margins. When I returned home, tired but exhilarated, my mother met me at the door. Clara, Major Davidson was here. Twice. He seemed agitated. I felt a cold trickle of satisfaction. Agitated was good. Did he say what he wanted? Just that he needed to speak with you. She wrung her hands. Do you think he's having second thoughts? I think he's realizing that things didn't go according to his script, I replied. He expected a grieving, compliant ex-wife, not one who vanished to pursue her own ambitions. 2 evenings later I found him waiting for me outside our gate. He looked tired, his uniform rumpled, shadows under his eyes. Clara, can we talk? There's nothing to discuss, David. I moved to pass him, but he stepped into my path. Please. It's about Sophia. I stopped and fixed him with a level gaze. Major Davidson, whatever is between you and Sophia is no concern of mine. You made that very clear. You've changed, he said, frustration edging his voice. You used to be so understanding. A smile touched my lips. I'm still understanding. I understood that you wanted to be with her, so I stepped aside. What could be more understanding than that? He was flustered, searching for words. Just then, as if on cue, Sophia appeared at the end of our street. Her face tightened when she saw us together. She hurried over, inserting herself between us with a proprietary air. David, what are you doing here? Her voice was sharp with a poorly disguised jealousy. I came to talk to Clara. Can't it wait until tomorrow? At the hospital, she pressed, her eyes darting to me. People will talk if they see you here. I couldn't help but laugh. She's right, David. You're a free man. You should cherish your time with comrade Sophia. Sophia's cheeks flushed crimson. You've misunderstood. David and I are just friends. Really? I raised an eyebrow. He divorced his wife for a friend? How very modern. That's enough, Clara. David snapped. Our raised voices had attracted attention. Mrs. Higgins' door creaked open, and soon other neighbors were peering from windows and doorways. The sound of hushed, excited whispers filled the alley. Sophia, mortified by the audience, tugged at David's sleeve. David, let's go. He shot me one last conflicted look before allowing her to lead him away. I watched them go, a cold smile playing on my lips. Clara, what was that about? Mrs. Higgins asked, scurrying over, her eyes gleaming. Is the major having regrets? Not at all, Mrs. Higgins, I said loudly enough for the whole street to hear. They just came to say goodbye. They're getting married soon. The gossip mill exploded. So soon? Only 3 days after the divorce. That Sophia doesn't waste any time. I went inside, the satisfying buzz of scandal ringing in my ears. Let the rumors fly. Let the entire military base know that David Davidson couldn't wait to replace me. A public reputation was a fragile thing, especially for an officer. I had just thrown the first stone. The next step was to make it official. I went to see Commissar Lewis, the senior political officer on the base. I requested a meeting, playing the part of the concerned, dutiful ex-wife. Commissar Lewis, I'm worried about David, I began, my face a mask of sincerity. He's been so distracted lately. I hear that relocated city girl Sophia has developed quite an attachment to him. So soon after our divorce. If it's not handled properly, it could look very bad for his career. Commissar Lewis's face grew stern. Relationships, especially illicit ones, were a serious matter in the military. Are you certain of this, Dr. Evans? I only want what's best for him, I said, laying on the concern thickly. I'd hate for him to make a mistake that could cost him everything. I left his office knowing I had planted a seed. I didn't need to accuse David directly. I merely needed to voice a concern to the right person. Let the machinery of military discipline do the work for me. I had learned in my past life that sometimes, the most effective attacks are the ones you make without getting your own hands dirty. The trap was set. The fallout was swift and more satisfying than I could have imagined. I was at the military hospital sorting patient files, when I heard the commotion echoing down the tiled corridor. It was Commissar Lewis's voice, sharp with anger. Major Davidson. My office now. I discreetly moved to the doorway. David and the commissar were standing in the hall a few yards away. David's posture was rigid, but his face was pale. This is a private matter, Commissar, David said, his voice tight. Is it? Lewis shot back, his tone icy. Then explain why Sophia Liu was seen leaving your quarters after midnight last night. David looked stunned. Who told you that? It doesn't matter who told me. Lewis brandished a piece of paper. I have a report here detailing your inappropriate relationship with that civilian. This conduct is unbecoming of an officer. By now, nurses and orderlies had gathered, their whispers creating a buzzing undercurrent. I stood in the doorway of my office, a silent spectator to the unraveling of David's career. She wasn't feeling well, David tried to explain, a weak defense that sounded pathetic even to my ears. I was just showing concern. Concern. Lewis's voice rose to a roar. Concern requires keeping a young woman in your private quarters until midnight? Do you take me for a fool, Major? David's composure cracked. This is an invasion of my privacy. Your privacy ended when you put on that uniform. Lewis snapped. Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty pending a full investigation. The word, suspended, hung in the air. It was a death knell for an ambitious officer. In my past life, their affair had been whispered about but never formally addressed. My intervention had changed the game entirely. The butterfly effect was real and I was the hurricane. David's face went ashen. He was utterly defeated. Later that day, Nurse Peters scurried into my office, her face alight with gossip. "Dr. Evans, did you hear? Major Davidson has been suspended. All because of that Sophia." I feigned surprise. "Suspended? Really? Serves him right," she huffed. "The audacity carrying on like that right after your divorce." I simply sighed. It's in the past now. My performance of dignified suffering was impeccable. The drama wasn't over. That afternoon as I was leaving the hospital, Sophia was waiting for me at the gates, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked desperate. "Clara, please, you have to help us." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. I pulled away coolly. "Help you with what?" "David's suspension. It's all my fault. Please, you have to talk to the commissar. Tell him we didn't do anything wrong." I looked at her, this woman who had destroyed my life in another timeline, and felt nothing but contempt. "If you did nothing wrong, why do you need me to testify?" Because people are saying things," she wailed. "And what would I say, Sophia? That the two of you were just playing chess." I let the sarcasm drip. "Your presence in his room at midnight suggests a different game altogether." Her tears flowed harder. "We love each other. It's not a crime." "Then when is the wedding?" I asked bluntly. Her face crumpled. After this is all over." "That could be a long time," I said, adopting a tone of mock sympathy. "A conduct investigation can take a year. Or longer. And if it's not resolved favorably, he could be discharged altogether." The blood drained from her face. "Discharged? No, he's too talented." "Talent doesn't matter if you break the rules," I said, twisting the knife. "Perhaps there's a way to minimize the damage." "How?" she asked, a glimmer of hope in her tear-filled eyes. "You could take the blame," I suggested calmly. "Admit that you pursued him. That he was vulnerable after the divorce and you took advantage. If you confess, he might be seen as a victim. His punishment would be lighter. You'd probably just be sent back to your hometown." The hope in her eyes died, replaced by pure terror. Being sent back to the impoverished village she came from was her worst nightmare. She would lose everything: David, her foothold in the city, her future. I can't," she stammered, shaking her head. "David would never allow it." "Then I suppose you'll have to watch his career burn," I said with a shrug. "You can't expect him to ruin his life for you, can you?" I left her standing there, a pathetic figure of despair. The satisfaction was deep and warm. This was the beginning of their end. I had presented her with a choice: sacrifice herself for him or watch him fall. Either way, their love would be tested, and I knew with absolute certainty that it would fail. That night, the sound of a heated argument woke me. I crept to my window. David and Sophia were in the courtyard below, their voices hushed but furious. "It's the only way, David." Sophia was sobbing. "If I say I seduced you, they'll go easier on you. I won't let you do that." David's voice was a low growl. "I'm a soldier. I face my own consequences. But your career? What about our future?" "A future built on your sacrifice is no future at all," he retorted. Then his voice dropped, filled with a bitterness I had never heard before. "I divorced Clara for you. Now I'm suspended because of you. I owe her." I smiled in the darkness. Now he felt indebted. "Too little too late. You're still thinking about her?" Sophia's voice turned shrill. "She doesn't care about you. She told me herself you deserved to be suspended." I froze. The little liar was twisting my words, trying to turn him against me. A moment later, a furious pounding shook our front door. "Clara, come out here. Now." It was David. I took my time putting on a robe before opening the door. He stood there, quivering with rage. "Did you tell Sophia I deserved to be suspended?" I looked him straight in the eye. "No, David. I did not." "She said you did." "Then she lied," I said flatly. "But believe whatever you want. Just don't bring your drama to my doorstep in the middle of the night." The anger drained from his face, replaced by confusion. Why would she lie? That's a question for her, I said and began to close the door. But he stopped it with his hand. Wait. His voice was suddenly soft, pleading. Hey. I think I've made a terrible mistake. I can't stop thinking about you. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. You divorced me for her 3 days ago, David. Make up your mind. I was confused. And what about Sophia? Does she deserve a man whose feelings change with the wind? I didn't wait for an answer. Go back to her, David. Don't disappoint her twice. I closed the door, locking it firmly. I heard him stand there for a long moment before his footsteps slowly retreated. The first cracks were appearing. Their perfect, tragic love story was already showing its rotten core. And I was only getting started. The confrontation with David left me not with anger, but with a profound sense of liberation. His pathetic attempt to crawl back only confirmed what I already knew. He was a weak man, led by his impulses, and the great love he shared with Sophia was a flimsy fantasy. I had no more room for him in my life, not even as a villain. He was simply irrelevant. My focus was now entirely on building my future. The next morning my mother and I set out for the antique market. It was 1978, and the true value of these old objects was a secret known only to a few. Most people saw junk, I saw a treasure trove. Relying on the knowledge from my past life, my eyes scanned the cluttered stalls with a practiced gaze. There. A porcelain vase from the Qing dynasty, caked with dirt, priced at a mere 7 yuan. I knew that in 20 years, it would fetch over 60,000. A landscape painting from the Republican era, slightly torn at the edge, was 12 yuan. A future auction star. I gathered them up along with a handful of ancient copper coins, spending just over 40 yuan in total. Clara, are you sure about these old things? My mother asked, her brow furrowed with doubt as I carefully wrapped my purchases. Trust me, Mom, I said, feeling the solid weight of the vase in my hands. In a few years this junk will pay for this house 10 times over. From the market we went to the post office. I invested a few more yuan in special edition stamps. Tiny pieces of paper that would become incredibly valuable. It was a safety net, a secret fortune waiting to be unlocked. That afternoon I walked into the county administration building with a new sense of purpose. I submitted my formal application for a private business license. The clerk, the same one I'd spoken to days before, looked over my paperwork. You're serious about this, Dr. Evans? Resigning from the military hospital is a big step. I'm certain, I said, my voice firm. I want to serve the community on my own terms. He nodded, impressed by my resolve. Once your resignation is processed, we can issue the license. My next stop was the hospital director's office. Dr. Miller was a kind, weary man. He looked shocked when I handed him my resignation letter. Clara, is this because of recent events? He asked, his tone gentle. Because if Davidson is making things difficult for you, we can intervene. Thank you, sir, but it's not that, I replied. This is a personal decision. I want to start my own clinic. He sighed, turning the letter over in his hands. It's a brave new world, I suppose. But it's a risk. Are you prepared? I am, I said. And I was. The fear I might have felt was overshadowed by the exhilarating certainty that I was taking control of my destiny. As I finished the paperwork, a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. I was free. No more regulations, no more hierarchy, no more living in the shadow of a man's career. The news of my resignation rippled through the military district, causing another wave of gossip. Most thought I had lost my mind. Let them talk. Meanwhile, the chaos in David and Sophia's world deepened. The butterfly effect I had set in motion was now a gale force wind. The most surprising news came the next day. Sophia had volunteered to be sent back to her hometown. She claimed she didn't want to cause David any more trouble. This was a deviation from my previous life. Last time she had clung to him like a limpet until she secured her position as his wife. It seemed the pressure of the investigation and the threat to David's career had been too much. Her love, it turned out, had its limits. When David heard she was leaving, he came to me one last time, a broken man. He found me in our backyard, sorting through medicinal herbs I had gathered. Clara, you have to help me, he begged, his voice ragged. She's leaving. I can't let her go. I didn't even look up from the roots I was cleaning. What does that have to do with me, David? Please, he implored, a desperate note in his voice I had never heard before. Talk to her. Convince her to stay. I stopped what I was doing and stared at him, truly astonished by his audacity. You want me to convince your mistress not to leave you? Have you lost all sense of shame? His face flushed, but the desperation remained. I'm begging you, Clara. If she goes back there, she'll never return. Good, I said coldly. Then you can both stop pretending this is some epic romance and admit it was a sordid little affair. He had no response. He just stood there, defeated, as the reality of his situation crashed down on him. I had finally seen the last of the proud Major Davidson. What remained was a hollowed-out man, reaping the consequences of his own poor choices. Go away, David, I said, my voice devoid of anger, only finality. My life has moved on. Yours should too. He left, his shoulders slumped. The next day, Sophia boarded a train out of the city. I heard from the base gossip mill that David saw her off at the station, and that it was a tearful, dramatic farewell. Some people were moved. I felt nothing. It was a fitting end to their tawdry drama. With them gone, the path was clear. I found a small, bright storefront on a busy street, signed the lease and began renovations. My mother was by my side every day, painting walls, building shelves, her initial worry transforming into excited energy. You've changed, Clara, she said one afternoon as we scrubbed the floor together. You used to be so quiet, always seeking David's opinion. Now, you're a force of nature. I was asleep before, Mom, I said, wringing out a rag. Now I'm awake. The clinic took shape. I bought second-hand medical equipment, sterilized it meticulously and stocked the shelves with medicines. I painted the sign myself, Evan's Family Clinic. It was simple, honest. It was mine. The night before the grand opening, I stood in the clean, quiet space. The scent of disinfectant and fresh paint filled the air. This was more than a business. It was a fortress I had built with my own 2 hands, a sanctuary from the storms of the past. David and Sophia were a fading nightmare. This clinic, this future, was my waking reality. I was ready. The morning of the clinic's opening dawned bright and clear. I woke before the sun, a nervous energy humming in my veins. This was it. The first day of the rest of my life. My mother was already in the kitchen, preparing a pot of strong tea, her hands fluttering with a mix of anxiety and excitement. Do you think anyone will come, Clara? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. They'll come, I said with more confidence than I felt. Word gets around. And we're offering free registration for the first 3 days. People can't resist free. We arrived at the clinic an hour early. I lit a stick of incense, a traditional gesture for good luck and to purify the air, its sandalwood scent mixing with the clean smell of the new linoleum floor. I arranged my instruments one last time, my stethoscope, my blood pressure cuff, all familiar friends from my past life, now serving a new purpose. At precisely 8 o'clock I unlocked the door and turned the sign to open. For the first hour nothing happened. The street outside bustled with life, but no one crossed our threshold. My mother's face began to fall. Then, just as doubt started to creep in, Mrs. Higgins from down the street bustled in, clutching her lower back. Clara dear, I heard you're open for business. My sciatica is acting up something fierce. The army doctors just give me pills that make me sleepy. I smiled, a genuine warm smile. Let's see what we can do, Mrs. Higgins. Please have a seat. I examined her carefully, asking detailed questions, just as I would have for a high-ranking officer. I prescribed a herbal poultice and a series of gentle stretches. She was my first patient. I treated her with the utmost care and respect. As she left, promising to tell everyone about the new doctor with the gentle hands, a young mother came in with a child suffering from a fever. Then an old man with a persistent cough. Then a construction worker with a deep gash on his hand. The dam had broken. The stream of patients was steady, a flow of minor ailments and chronic conditions that the overburdened state hospitals often overlooked. I treated each one with patience, listening to their stories as much as their symptoms. I charged fair prices, far less than the hospital, and for the very poor, I accepted a basket of eggs or a bag of vegetables in payment. The word spread like wildfire. By the end of the first day I was exhausted but exhilarated. My mother, who had taken on the role of receptionist and cleaner, counted the day's earnings with trembling hands. Clara, It's more than you made in a week at the hospital, she exclaimed, her eyes wide. This is just the beginning, Mom, I said, massaging my tired shoulders. People need a doctor who will listen to them. That's what we'll provide. The clinic became more than a business. It became a community hub. People came not just for medicine but for advice, for a sympathetic ear. I was no longer Major Davidson's ex-wife. I was Dr. Evans. The respect I earned was for my own skills, my own character. It was a feeling more potent than any I had ever known. It was during this time of blossoming success that David reappeared. He looked worse than I had ever seen him. The suspension had taken its toll. His uniform hung loosely on him and his eyes were hollow. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of my clinic, waiting until the last patient had left. Clara, he began, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Congratulations. The clinic is thriving. Thank you, I said, my tone neutral as I wiped down the examination table. He hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. There's something I need to ask you. I didn't respond, simply continued my cleaning, forcing him to voice his request. I want to apply for reinstatement, he said finally. But the commissar, he needs a statement. From you. I stopped and looked at him. What kind of statement? A statement saying that our divorce was due to irreconcilable differences. That there was no third party involved. The sheer, breathtaking gall of it left me speechless for a moment. I actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed in the quiet clinic. You want me to lie? To put my name on a document that clears you of misconduct so you can get your rank back after you left me for another woman? His face tightened. I know it's a lot to ask. But my career. Your career is your problem, David. I cut him off, my voice cold and firm. I will not perjure myself for you. I will not stain my new reputation to clean up your mess. So you hate me that much? He whispered, a flash of pain in his hollow eyes. I don't hate you, I said, and I realized it was true. The emotion I felt was closer to pity. I am indifferent to you. I don't want you in my life in any capacity. You made your choices. Live with them. He stared at me and I saw the final flicker of hope in his eyes die out. He had come to me as a last resort, believing that some remnant of my former softness would save him. He found only unyielding stone. I see, he said, his voice flat. He turned and walked out of the clinic, his footsteps echoing with a finality that was more profound than any slammed door. I watched him go, feeling the last thread that connected me to my past life snap. There was no storm of emotion, only a quiet, deep-seated peace. He was gone. Truly gone. The world of the military compound, of whispered scandals and dutiful wives, was behind me. My world was here in this bright room with the scent of herbs and the promise of healing. I had not just survived, I had built something new from the ashes. And I was only getting started. The calm of my new life was shattered about 2 months later by a piece of news that exploded through the town like a cannon shot. Sophia was back. And she was pregnant. I heard it first from a patient, an elderly woman whose arthritis I was treating. Did you hear Dr. Evans? She whispered, her eyes wide with gossip. That city girl, the one who caused all the trouble with the major. She's returned. And she's showing. I kept my hands steady as I applied the acupuncture needle. Is that so? I murmured, my voice betraying nothing. Oh yes. There's no doubt who the father is, she continued, oblivious to my lack of reaction. The scandal. And with him still suspended, what a mess. I finished the treatment with professional detachment, but my mind was racing. This was a significant deviation. In my past life, Sophia's pregnancy had occurred after their marriage, cementing her position. Now it was happening under a cloud of disgrace. The pressure on their relationship would be immense. Later that day I saw her. She was standing across the street from my clinic, looking lost and much older than her years. The youthful delicacy that had been her hallmark was gone, replaced by a pale, puffy weariness. And there, unmistakably, was the small round swell of her belly beneath her coat. She saw me watching her and, after a moment's hesitation, crossed the street and stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, a stark contrast to her grim expression. Clara, she said, her voice thin and reedy. Sophia, I replied, not offering a chair. Do you need medical attention? I need to talk to you. It's about David. I've told you before I have nothing to say about David. Please, she begged, tears welling in her eyes instantly. It was her old trick, but it had lost its potency. Now she just looked desperate. You have to help us. He'll never be reinstated with this situation. Her hand fluttered over her stomach. And what would you have me do? As my tone cool. If you could just talk to Commissar Lewis, she pleaded, stepping closer. Tell him that you and David were already estranged before the divorce. That we didn't, that nothing happened until after. I looked pointedly at her belly, then back at her face. And what would you call that, Sophia? Immaculate conception. She flushed a deep, blotchy red. I could say it's not his. The words hung in the air, so shocking in their cynicism that I was momentarily speechless. She was willing to brand her own child a bastard to save David's career. You would deny your own baby? I finally managed, my voice low with disgust. What choice do I have? She wailed, her composure breaking completely. If he can't get back into the army, we have nothing. No future. That sounds like a you problem, I said, turning my back to her to organize some bottles on a shelf. I will not be a part of your lies. Clara, I'm begging you. Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. Then to my utter horror I heard a thud. I turned around. She was on her knees on my clean floor, her hands clasped in front of her. Please. I'll do anything. The sight of a pregnant woman on her knees was a powerful, ugly image. Despite my hatred for her, a knot of discomfort tightened in my stomach. Get up, Sophia, I said sharply. This is undignified. Not until you agree to help us. I will never agree, I said, my voice cold as iron. Get up or I will call the authorities and have you removed for causing a disturbance. The threat jolted her. She looked up at me, and for the first time she saw not the pushover she had manipulated before, but a woman of unshakable resolve. The hope in her eyes died, replaced by a terrifying emptiness. She slowly, awkwardly got to her feet. You're a heartless bitch, she whispered, her voice trembling with venom. No, I replied, holding her gaze. I am just a woman who has learned not to set herself on fire to keep others warm. Now get out of my clinic. She left, stumbling into the street. I watched her go, my heart pounding not with guilt, but with a fierce, protective anger. She had tried to drag me back into their swamp of deceit. I had refused. The line was drawn. The next day David came. He stormed into the clinic, his face a mask of fury. He looked even worse than before, his anger barely covering a deep, panicked despair. How could you? He snarled, slamming his hand on my desk. She's pregnant, Clara. How could you be so cruel as to let her kneel to you? I didn't flinch. I stood up, meeting his anger with icy calm. Let's be very clear, David. She knelt of her own volition. I did not ask her to, and I told her to get up. Your theatrics are wasted here. She's carrying my child. Have you no compassion? Compassion? The word felt like ash in my mouth. You speak to me of compassion? Where was your compassion for me? And as for your child, perhaps you should ask the mother what she was willing to do for you. His rage faltered. What are you talking about? She came here offering to tell the world that the baby isn't yours, I said, watching the color drain from his face. She was prepared to brand her own child a bastard just to get you reinstated. That's the woman you're defending. That's the great love you threw everything away for. The anger vanished from his face, replaced by a stunned, sickened horror. She wouldn't. Ask her, I said simply. Then come back and tell me if I'm lying. He stood there, paralyzed, the foundation of his world crumbling beneath his feet. The woman he loved was not only a liar but capable of a profound, unnatural betrayal. The career he cherished was in ruins. And the wife he had discarded was standing before him, successful, respected, and utterly beyond his reach. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked away, a broken man in a shabby uniform, his future collapsing in on itself. I knew then that it was over. Whatever hold the past had on me was finally, completely broken. Their tragedy was theirs alone to endure. My story was one of survival, and it was just beginning to get interesting. The days after David's visit were quiet. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. The gossip about Sophia's pregnancy and David's suspension continued to swirl, but it no longer felt connected to me. I was an observer now, not a participant. My clinic thrived. My reputation as a skilled, compassionate, and affordable doctor grew with each patient I treated. I even hired a young woman from the neighborhood to help my mother with the reception duties, freeing me to focus on medicine. The independence was intoxicating. Every yuan I earned was mine, a direct result of my own labor and knowledge. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon when David came to see me for what I knew would be the last time. He didn't storm in this time. He simply appeared in the doorway looking like a ghost of the man he once was. His uniform was gone, replaced by ill-fitting civilian clothes. The suspension had become permanent. He had been discharged from the army. He stood there for a long moment just watching me as I labeled a new shipment of herbs. The anger and desperation were gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, weary resignation. "Clara," he said, his voice rough as if from disuse. I looked up. "David. Can I talk to you?" I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. He sat down heavily like an old man. "Sophia's gone," he said, staring at his hands. "She left a note. Said she couldn't live like this. That she was going back to her family." He gave a bitter, hollow laugh. "I later heard from a friend that she was seen getting into a car with a wealthy merchant from the south. She's not going back to her village." I said nothing. I had expected as much. Sophia's love was conditional on David's status. With that gone, she had cut her losses. She admitted it, he continued, his voice barely a whisper. "What you said. About the baby. She said she would have done it if it meant saving my career." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a profound shame. "You were right about everything." I felt no triumph, only a distant pity. "It doesn't matter now, David." "It matters to me," he insisted. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Clara, I need you to know. I realize now that I never stopped loving you. I was just too much of a fool to see it. Losing you, it's destroyed me." The confession hung in the air between us. In another life, it would have been everything I wanted to hear. It would have been my salvation. Now it was just words, empty and far too late. I looked at him, this man who had been the axis of my universe for so long, and felt nothing but a quiet finality. "David," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "What you're feeling isn't love. It's regret. You miss the stability I represented. You miss the life you had. But you didn't value it when you had it. You threw it away for a fantasy." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "Love isn't something you realize after you've betrayed it," I continued. "It's not a prize you come back for when you're lonely. The man I loved, the one I thought you were, would never have done what you did. That man is gone. And the woman who loved him is gone too." Tears welled in his eyes, but they didn't move me. They were tears of self-pity, not genuine remorse. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. The weight of my anger was gone. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you back. My life is here now. It's a good life. A life I built for myself. I don't want you in it." He stared at me, and I saw the last flicker of hope in his heart extinguish. He had come to me as a last, desperate refuge and found the door closed forever. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I understand," he whispered. He stood up, his movements slow and stiff. I wish you well, Clara. You deserve it." "Goodbye, David," I said. He walked out of the clinic and I watched him disappear down the street. He didn't look back. There was no dramatic finale, no thunderclap. It was just a sad man walking away, swallowed by the ordinary life of the city. A sense of profound peace settled over me. It was truly over. The ghost of my past life had been laid to rest. The toxic bond that had connected me to David and Sophia had been severed, not by death but by my own will. I had faced them, I had survived them, and I had transcended them. I turned back to my work, to the soothing rhythm of measuring herbs and labeling jars. The little bell above the door jingled, and a new patient entered, complaining of a cough. I smiled, welcomed them, and began the familiar, comforting ritual of diagnosis and care. This was my world. It was clean, honest, and mine alone. The past had no power here. The years that followed were a testament to the quiet power of perseverance. The story of David and Sophia became a local cautionary tale, a piece of scandalous history that was occasionally whispered about but quickly forgotten in the face of new gossip. David, I heard, drifted from one low-level clerical job to another. He never remarried. He became a spectral figure in our town, a man who had once been somebody and was now a permanent nobody. I would see him sometimes in the market or walking along the river and I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just a neutral acknowledgement like seeing a familiar tree. Sophia, true to rumor, had indeed attached herself to a wealthy businessman. She was seen in a nearby city, dressed in fine clothes, but the word was that she was his mistress, not his wife. She had traded one kind of dependency for another, never finding the security she so desperately craved. Their story was a tragedy of their own making and I was glad to be rid of it. My clinic, however, flourished. Evan's family clinic became a cornerstone of the community. As China changed and reformed at a breathtaking pace, my little business grew with it. I expanded, renting the space next door, hiring a properly trained nurse, and even taking on a young doctor fresh from medical school as an apprentice. My mother, bless her, became the formidable manager of the front office, her initial worries replaced by a fierce pride. The antiques and stamps I had bought for a pittance became our secret fortune. In the mid-1980s, as the economy boomed and collectors scrambled for relics of the past, I sold a few pieces, just enough to buy the building that housed my clinic. We were no longer tenants, we were owners. The sense of security that brought was profound. One afternoon, a young woman came into the clinic, her face pinched with anxiety. She was newly married, she said, and her husband's family was pressuring her to quit her job at a local factory to have a baby. My mother-in-law says a woman's place is in the home, she confided in me, her voice trembling. But I love my job. I don't know what to do. I finished checking her blood pressure and sat down opposite her. I saw my younger self in her eyes. The fear, the confusion, the desire to please warring with a nascent sense of self. Let me tell you a story, I said gently. I was once told that my place was defined by my husband. I believed it and it nearly destroyed me. I gestured around the bright, busy clinic. I built this. Not a husband, not a father. Me. Your place is wherever you decide it is. Don't let anyone, not even family, tell you otherwise. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of relief, of recognition. She left with a straighter back and a determined look on her face. In that moment I realized my clinic was more than a place of healing for physical ailments. It was a sanctuary for wounded spirits. A quiet testament to the idea that a woman could be the architect of her own life. Years turned into decades. My hair grew streaked with gray and lines appeared around my eyes, etched not by worry but by laughter and the sun. I never remarried. I had suitors, kind men who admired my strength and success, but my heart was content. It belonged to my work, to my mother, to the life I had so painstakingly built. On the 20th anniversary of the clinic's opening, we held a small party. The street was closed off and tables laden with food stretched down the block. Former patients, now old friends, came to celebrate. They brought their children and their grandchildren. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces of the community I had served and who had, in turn, sustained me. My mother, now elderly but still sharp, sat beside me, squeezing my hand. "Look what you did, Clara," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at all these lives you've touched." I squeezed her hand back, my own eyes misting over. The journey had been long and painful, born from the ashes of a terrible betrayal. But as I looked around me at the laughter, the joy, the profound sense of belonging, I knew that every hardship had been worth it. David and Sophia had been the catalyst, but they were not the story. My story was one of resilience. It was about a woman who woke up, took a pen and signed her name not to a death sentence, but to a declaration of independence. The divorce paper wasn't an ending. It was the first page of my real life. And as I sat there, surrounded by love and respect I had earned for myself, I knew with absolute certainty that I had written a beautiful ending after all. The end.